Dr. Flores and Cynthia, if you want to come up, that'd be awesome. Sure.
Okay. So I'll just go through the remaining slides briefly. I think you were...
I don't think we need to. We were told that some of the board members said we could just, you've seen the slides, and just to see if you have any questions.
Is the board, are you comfortable with that, asking any questions? Are there any questions for the ladies at the podium over assessment? Do you want to go over the RFP timeline?
Yeah,
please.
I did want to note that we have the draft underway. We are still on schedule for this to come to board members for review May 22nd and allow for a 2-week time frame for you to review and add comments or concerns or clarifications. So we will be in touch soon about that review.
So we'll be able to get feedback?
Yes.
And that goes to you?
It goes to our team, yes. So we have a staff member that's coordinating and overseeing this process, and we convene a committee following each round of review so that together we can make those adjustments.
You've probably already told us this. Who's on that RFP group?
The slide delineated that. It was there and then it left.
Is there a book somewhere?
So we have our program leads that are managing ISTEP and the high school programs in our assessment office. I've also been incorporating legal as part of that review. John Keller has been part of that. Leanne has been part of that. And then also Cynthia has been actively involved as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Dr. Flores or Cynthia? Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, next item on the agenda, I believe, Turnaround Academies updates. Do you want me to go to something else, Ron? Okay. You guys ready? No? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Not really. It doesn't sound like it's on. But just, okay. Can you hear me? There you go. Okay. Good afternoon, State Board of Education and Superintendent McCormick. I'm glad to be here today to present an update on behalf of 3 EVSC Turnaround Academies: Lincoln Community School, Glenwood Leadership Academy, and Kays Elementary, who the Office of Transformational Support is proud to serve as internal state-approved intervention. I am Kelsey Wright, EVSC Director of School Transformation. I would also like to welcome you all to our community and thank those of you who took the time yesterday to visit 3 of our schools. It spoke volumes to our staff, students, and families that those making decisions that impact our everyday work know the importance of spending time where the work happens. Thank you. As evidenced on the chart, student attendance is higher this year consistently each month. Enrollment remains slightly higher at this point in the year than where we ended in 2016. Following trends in years past, Lincoln hosts a very transient population at 46% student mobility throughout this school year. Referrals to date are consistent with last year, averaging approximately 7 referrals per day both this year and last. Suspension occurrences in total are estimated in May to land just under last year's amount, which is also true for their number of days and number of students suspended. I also want to note the historical improvements that have been made at Lincoln in terms of average office referrals per day, beginning prior to TZ embedded support to current reality. That's an improved difference of 15.4 referrals per day. If I can direct your attention to the table that the chart below represents, in ELA, 5 out of 9 grade levels met or exceeded NWEA's projected growth goals at middle of year benchmark, and that's depicted on the table in the various shades of green. Unfortunately, I do not have end-of-year data yet to share, as students are currently undergoing testing. However, I would like to also highlight that when comparing spring iRead pass rates to those of the prior year, there is a preliminary improvement of 16%. Middle of the year math NWEA results showed that 6 out of 9 grade levels met or exceeded their projected growth, resulting in the school as a whole meeting their middle of the year math goal. As this is our first year utilizing NWEA as a benchmark assessment, we have spent this year learning how to administer tests, access and comprehend reports, and utilize that information to inform our instruction. Data coaches across the district have spent the last couple weeks facilitating an end-of-year reflection with each school, assessing where each grade level is on the path to utilizing data to drive daily instructional planning and facilitation. While we are not yet where we want to be, we are clear about where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. Lincoln has retained all teaching staff since our last update in November. One of the teachers we lost early in the year left us in a position without any licensed middle school science candidates. We were able to quickly adapt and put in place a partnership with EVSC's Virtual Academy, who utilizes Compass Learning to provide our students digital curriculum. This partnership provides Lincoln students differentiated science instruction through a personalized learning path that is monitored and altered by licensed EVSC Virtual Academy teachers. Staff attendance is a strength at Lincoln. It has shown consistent improvement every month this year and remains well above the state average, which was 95.8% last year. This year at Lincoln, the staff has focused intentionally on backwards design instructional planning and the taxonomy level of questions and tasks within instruction. This work primarily occurs within our daily professional learning communities, who also meet weekly in vertical PLCs to assure alignment across grade levels. The next steps for this work include the implementation of assessment and student work analysis protocols for shorter cycles of data-informed instruction. We want to begin asking ourselves the question in PLCs, how will this affect my instruction tomorrow? In November, I highlighted the support that Lincoln receives from the Office of Transformational Support. While that still holds true, I'd like to dig a little deeper into how we measure improvement throughout the school year for shorter cycles of school improvement. After the school improvement plan is developed, progress monitoring systems are created, aligned to the strategy selected to address the root causes identified. These systems are utilized to measure not only implementation, but more importantly, improvement or lack thereof, so that as an internal lead partner, we are truly monitoring for support and act responsively to real-time needs of the school. Here's an example of systems and measures created and analyzed to drive our school improvement work at Lincoln. Lincoln's goal was to ensure that the work occurring in PLCs, unpacking standards into standards-aligned learning targets, and writing aligned assessments transferred to teacher practice of facilitating student learning with more complex learning tasks. The systems created align directly with these goals, and data is collected on all teachers monthly with auto-populated results such as those depicted below to allow the OTS and Lincoln leaders to make decisions on staff and differentiated teacher support in reaching this goal. In our April measurements, we doubled our beginning of the year results for standards-aligned learning target evidence, and are seeing shifts begin to occur from this work within the complexity of student tasks. Our learning and development with NWEA this year is also reflective in our RTI process. We have spent this year learning to use Skills Checklists and Skills Navigator within NWEA for the purpose of monitoring student progress and correct intervention selection for students to improve their greatest deficits. This year was also our first year to launch ALEX as a math intervention option district-wide, while we previously focused solely on reading interventions. In addition to the monthly work of Lincoln's Family and Community Engagement Coordinator with community and parent councils, Lincoln hosts additional events in partnership with community members, families, and students. Thanks to Girl Scouts of Southwest Indiana, Lincoln received funding for a community garden and school ground beautification. Community partners and 8th graders were asked to volunteer their time for this community service project. There was an overwhelming turnout with 95% 8th grade participation. Lincoln also hosted their first ever mother-son sports night to follow their infamous daddy-daughter dance. Approximately 65 were in attendance, and as you will see up there to the right, mother's strength reigned in a game of tug-of-war. In the transformation zone and at Lincoln, we live by continuous improvement steps of plan, do, check, act. There have been multiple cycles of this occurring this year, but upon ending another school year, we are back on the plan stage once again. Our first step will be to reassess our root causes to refresh the school improvement plan for next year utilizing our progress monitoring data. We will also finalize systems and protocols for seamless launch in the fall for both PLC assessment protocols and student work analysis protocols. And lastly, we plan to tighten our internal coaching cycle procedures driven by classroom evidence and teacher collaboration. Are there questions specific to Lincoln, or would you like to hear an update on all three schools and discuss thoughts at the end?
Are you guys comfortable to go ahead? Why don't we just go ahead and we'll do it at the end. Thank you.
All right. I would like to now share our results at Glenwood Leadership Academy, which most of you had the pleasure of visiting yesterday. Student attendance is higher every month this year as compared to 15-16, and student enrollment is higher every month except for March. Enrollment mirrors the trends from last year, but with higher numbers. We've seen an improvement at GLA this year in student mobility, which is down approximately 10% to a low of 44%. However, this transient population is emblematic of the community mobility. When students leave Glenwood, 82% of the time it is due to change of housing. This may be school-specific, but there are also district ramifications, as 56 of these moves are still within the EVSC district. We are continuing to improve our systems of data and communication so that receiving schools know just as much about each student as the prior school, as well as tighten our vision and alignment for teaching and learning to create congruency for our students and families, while maintaining the delicate balance of providing latitude and support for teachers and schools. Average referrals for 2015-16 were 3.4 per day as compared to 2.5 this year through April. Currently, 57% of office referrals are written for unsafe physical actions, dealing with most behaviors such as defiance in the classroom, or with a quick restorative practice intervention just outside the room to keep the student from missing as little instructional time as possible. Student suspensions are also down this year, not only in terms of number of suspensions, but more drastically when analyzed in terms of number of days out of school, which is on track to be reduced by 43% this year, and number of students receiving a suspension, which is down 27%. A dramatic school culture and climate reform of dropping 19 referrals per day since becoming a transformation zone school is due to many factors such as focus on building relationships, speaking with specific and positive praise, and a team dedicated to the social and emotional needs of students at Glenwood. Glenwood continues to be on the cutting edge for EVSC in social and emotional learning, working closely with our Director of Neuroeducation on the implementation of a universal social-emotional screener and interventions such as Mind Up and Activate to improve the executive functions of focused attention, self-control, working memory, and processing speed. 4 out of 9 grade levels met or exceeded NWEA's middle of the year ELA projected growth. GLA met their overall middle of the year growth goal for reading, and NWEA's linking study showed that GLA is poised from middle of year testing to improve their ISEP pass rates by 5% in ELA. Classroom walkthrough data is also a positive predictor that our NWEA end of year will improve due to the continued improvement in instructional delivery that I will share more about in later slides. iRead preliminary spring pass rates have also improved by 9% this year as yet another positive indicator of improvement. Middle of year math NWEA results show that 5 out of 9 grade levels met or exceeded NWEA's projected growth goals, and NWEA's linking study showed that GLA is poised from middle of the year testing to improve their ISEP pass rates by 5% in math as well. Glenwood has retained all of their teaching staff throughout this school year to date, which was not the case last year, and at this time are only looking at having 3 certified staff moves prior to the 17-18 school year, which all consist of promotions or relocation from Evansville. This historically has not occurred, with anywhere from 6 to 12 moves each year after the staff recommitment process in spring 2012, when we replaced 25 certified staff positions at Glenwood. Staff attendance at Glenwood is also set to improve this year. We attribute both of these improvements to the sustainability of leadership, positive school environment, and strong teacher support structures. In conjunction with Learning Sciences International, Glenwood chose to continue their deepening of their understanding of the first 6 instructional strategies in the 3rd staff development session this year, and at the same time focused on instructional planning and delivery that would scaffold students beyond the taxonomy level of retrieval. To continue this work, LSI, with OTS support, will facilitate a 2-day unit planning session with small group facilitation and individualized support in planning 1 to 2 units that scaffold appropriately to rigor after school is out this May 22nd and 23rd. LSI will kick off next year with the next 6 instructional strategies within Teach to Reach for core instruction. In November, I explained the LSI and OTS coaching cycles for school leadership in partnership with professional development content provided to all staff. The goal being that school leadership focus on research-based instructional strategies with fidelity to improve classroom instruction and student outcomes. We have continued that coaching support throughout the year, as well as realigned coaching capacity for teachers for tighter teacher feedback cycles from PLC to classroom instruction. I would like to share our results from that work. 4 rigor walks have been conducted over the course of this school year by LSI, approximately quarterly. To better grasp LSI's process for collecting this data, I'll speak specifically to the 4th rigor walk conducted in April. 10 teachers in 5 out of the 8 grade levels were observed across 10 courses, consisting of 50% math and 50% ELA instruction, which represents 28% of the possible teachers to be observed at GLA. As depicted, improvements were made this year within all domains, but Glenwood's intentional efforts and focus within conditions for learning rigorous standards and standards-based student evidence resulted in the highest scores, while laying the foundation for our continued work next year. While Learning Sciences Rigor Walks provides us with external evaluation benchmark data, more specific indicators have been defined and systems aligned to allow formative progress monitoring, as exampled in the chart, to occur in monthly cycles to drive our school improvement work between benchmarks toward our goals. In addition to the district-wide work of learning to utilize NWEA to monitor student progress and select interventions, EVSC data coaches are also supporting teachers in how to utilize reports to drive Tier 1 instruction, such as the class breakdown report to group students by goal, or the learning continuum to identify students for small group remediation and enrichment. Glenwood hosts monthly family and community engagement events over a range of themes. From Math Madness, where grade level standards, strategies, and activities were shared, and select community partners provided STEM demonstrations for students and families, to Black History Celebration, where 154 stakeholders viewed projects and performances from grades K through 8 celebrating Black history, to Social Emotional Learning Night, where positive mental health information and resources were shared by community partners. GLA Social Emotional Learning Team educated families on the interventions provided within the school day, and concluded with a viewing of Disney's Inside Out. At Glenwood Leadership Academy, we will continue to use external LSI benchmark and internal formative monitoring data to drive our work, building on the successes of this year for continued improvement in our instructional practices and student learning. Kays Elementary began their turnaround work with the Office of Transformational Support as a part of the Transformation Zone prior to receiving Turnaround Academy status this February. We were not required to track data prior to formal intervention, but due to the OTS data-driven mindset, we've been collecting indicators for our internal OTS dashboard for progress monitoring, and will be able to share a more robust picture today of Kays' current reality and improvement than just the last few months. Student attendance is on track to improve beyond their benchmark of 96.9 last school year, as well as an enrollment that continues to rise and currently hosts 76 students more. Current enrollment demographics consist of 92% free and reduced lunch, 17% special education, 8% English learners, and a student population mobility of 32%. Culture and climate at Kays has continued to be an area of focus this year, with the addition of both a social-emotional learning interventionist who responds to student needs with real-time interventions and a part-time social emotional learning specialist who observes students within the instructional environment to create student-specific function-based behavior plans and support teachers in the implementation of these plans. The data is evidence of this improvement, with a 40% reduction in both referrals and suspensions for the year through April. With only 1 out of 6 grade levels meeting their projected growth in ELA, it is clear that Kays is not as far down the path of transformation as you have seen evidenced by the other turnaround academies to date. OTS believes in aligning support to the most pressing identified needs with intentionality. Where Lincoln and GLA have been able to move beyond the initial work of setting conditions for learning, that was the focus of Kays this year, priming the learning environment for the instructional shift towards student-centered instruction with rigor. Since the middle of the year data was released, Kays has also worked diligently on holding individualized data chats per student to increase awareness of differentiated needs for both teacher and student. Again, I unfortunately do not have end-of-year data to share yet due to students still undergoing testing, but we are excited about what these intentional efforts may yield in terms of student growth. With a school improvement plan focused on the implementation of math workshop through the support of Dr. Flessner at Butler University, 4 out of 6 grade levels met their middle-of-the-year projected growth, which led to the school meeting their overall middle-of-the-year projected growth goal in math. Kays has retained all teaching staff this year, and teacher attendance is set to improve. However, as it falls below the state average for teacher attendance, this will continue to be a focal point of the OTS. As we sustain and grow leadership and build strong teacher support structures that were not previously in place, we expect this to continue positive trends. Through the current district partnership with Learning Sciences International, the Office of Transformational Support and 20 others from across EVSC began training this year towards accreditation as LSI Certified Results Coaches as another avenue of building district internal capacity. Through this training, the OTS worked with school leadership to identify a ready coalition of the willing to begin the work of an instructional shift at Kays. 5 teacher volunteers, along with school leadership, met weekly, starting second quarter, to develop a leadership team invested in learning and applying essential strategies and techniques for achieving rigor through chunked PD sessions with content based on the Marzano Center Essentials for Achieving Rigor series. Due to this central office training for scalability, sustainability, and internal development of a coalition of the willing at Kays Elementary, and utilizing lessons learned from the first 3 LSI demonstration schools in EVSC, Kays is primed for an accelerated trajectory with LSI as they join in as one of 3 new schools to begin work with LSI fully this summer. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions?
I have one. Actually, 2. Good work on the iRead. You're showing some significant growth. That's impressive, so good job on that.
Thank you.
Who were you working with at Butler for your math workshop?
Dr. Ryan Flessner.
Have you done that for a while?
Yes, this is our second year. He has a couple teachers across the district, but 2 specifically, and one is at Kays, who is helping him even with his research. So that's helped tremendously with our math.
Thank you. Any other questions? You're doing good work in Evansville. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. State Board of Ed Technical Advisory Committee update. And I know, Megan, we'll answer some questions for you. I know it's been you've been very patient today.
Okay, so this was actually included in the assessment presentation, but we didn't get to it, so I'll just go over some quick high points, okay? In April, we had our last TAC meeting, and we walked away with 3 recommendations regarding the iRead 3 cut score validation, the science assessment development, and the core test technical documentation. Now, the iRead 3 and the science were formal recommendations as to how to move forward with both. The core test was again going back to collecting additional information. Our plan is to meet again in July on this additional data that they have requested, and hopefully we will have, our goal is to have some sort of recommendation from them by August or early September. But I understand the process is lengthy. There are many, many tests. But again, they did meet and discuss in April, and to the concerns expressed, we're not taking this lightly. It is a very serious thing, but it's quite a big task to evaluate. So that's sort of where I am right now. And Charity, do you want to add?
I would just add one clarification.
Please.
So with the core test documentation, I would just highlight that TAC reviewed the validity claims around all of the evidence that they received. At this point in time, they had no significant concerns with how those tests were formalized, developed. They were deemed to be valid based on the evidence that was presented to them. So the additional conversations is in formalizing additional technical documentation, but not related to any concerns that TAC had specifically.
Any questions on that? Dr. Freitas?
Can I ask an affiliated question of ESSA? ESSA has a requirement that any test that we adopt in the future needs to be valid and reliable.
Yes.
It's part of federal law.
Yes.
And is TAC ready to somehow give us guidance on tests we may consider?
Yes, so one aspect of the RFP that we will elicit tax feedback on specifically are those two components. So the technical nature of formalizing the assessments is part of the RFP scope. So we're requesting that TAC review that explicitly to ensure that we're taking appropriate steps.
It's really good news. The other question that's related to that is we may decide to adopt a standardized test that's currently out there where validity, reliability has been determined by the provider, by the creator of that particular test. However, they may have done their studies for a certain purpose that may not be the same purpose as we will use that test for.
Sure.
Understand what I'm saying? So is TAC ready to sort of look at that test that was pre-validated in a different kind of way? And do we have the expertise and the resources allocated to do that?
Yes, so the timeline that was defined in 1003 allows for additional analyses if we were to utilize a bank that already exists to ensure that we can do some equating to ensure that the Indiana population is represented well, even if that test has been provided to other populations previously.
And my last question deals with the alignment with Indiana standards. Some of these nationally standardized tests that are not aligned, for example, with Indiana academic standards. And so tax review will take that into consideration.
Yes, we do also have that aspect addressed explicitly in the RFP as a requirement. I won't go into great detail, but it is noted.
Right, that's good news.
Oh, Dr. Ernest and then Dr. Yeager.
Do we have any, and I'm really not sure who I'm asking this question of, but somebody can answer me, hopefully. Do we have anything that we can do in the interim of our core standards issue? Because I'm going to call it still an issue, right? We're still doing some studies and looking at and what have you. July's too late for Megan.
For hiring.
For hiring and anyone else. Is there anything we can do in the interim that's in our purview to, at a time when we're having trouble finding teachers, when what are our options, or are there options? I'd just like to have a little discussion about what could we do?
Well, and I think Dr. Flores' comment about the first round of review really produced no concerns regarding the assessments. The second, so that's not good news for folks who are waiting on something to change with that, unless the state board is going to go down that route of we don't want any type of assessment necessary for teacher licensing, and that's a whole other discussion. But the assessment we've chosen based on what the review came back in pretty good shape. So the next piece of discussion is just not regarding the validity and reliability, correct, of the assessments?
Right, so TAC had recommendations about long-term strategies that the vendor could utilize to ensure that their technical documentation was more robust, but it wasn't that what they've represented is deficient to make the validity claim.
So we would have to then, if we weren't happy with that answer, I think we have limited options unless our legislation would change, but maybe looking at vendor, I mean, we'd have to have another discussion as far as what avenue do we want to go based on the results that we now know. I think it's a good thing for the board to know there weren't concerns that were found. I mean, that's step one. Not that it helps folks who are waiting in the wings, that does not help. Scott, did you have more to add? I know you've been part of this research for us.
Yeah, so I think it's probably smart that we be mindful that, you know, these tests, we haven't been doing these exams very long, and it's a real process to, you know, initiate this whole testing cycle. If we wanted to like you said, you know, go back and look for another vendor and try to go back and recreate this whole thing again, it's quite an extensive process. And so, you know, I think we're taking the right steps and having the TAC work through some feedback for us on what we can do to make them better, but I think we just need to keep in mind that we haven't been doing these very long. Yeah.
One of the concerns is not the reliability of the test itself, but in this transition period when we have the students who, you know, who were juniors and seniors who took classes that were not part of the new standards, but took the test that is the new standards. Because those professors were not teaching towards that test that is the new core licensure test. Was that discussed as part of the TAC discussion?
So it wasn't.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, and that would have been how many state board, I mean, that would have been 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2014. So it would have been prior to that.
Yeah.
I think of what you're talking about. But we have had some initial conversations with Pearson just recently since I started with the department around the process of reviewing those standards on a regular basis and making sure that those are up to date, and then as well as matching those to the content exams.
But I guess what I'm asking is, if I have a student who graduates today, who takes the core licensure exam, they've known, and their professors have known, that this core licensure exam has been in existence. They've known what types of questions are on it. They've been preparing for that test. In the same way I, as a teacher in 6th grade, work on the I-STEP test. If I took the test a year and a half ago, and I was the first group who got to take the new exam, I wasn't prepared maybe in quite the same way because I was the first one to take the exam in the new way. And so there's a group of students there that are those transition students. And so that's the group not that I'm not worried about the students taking it today.
Right.
But are we talking about, is the TAC group talking about those transition students who have not passed it versus if a student takes it today and doesn't pass it?
Sure. So one aspect that TAC was presented was the overall development. This is a brief summary of that, but they did not indicate any concerns with the information they were presented associated with the timeline and how that was rolled out in relationship to being assessed by those requirements.
So what's our overall pass rate?
Depending on which test.
Yeah, so it varies by content test.
But do we know like an overall?
I don't have a percentage on the top of my head of what the average of all we have 61 tests, so, you know, they vary. You know, some are pretty high, and a few we know are, you know, lower. And I think what we want to do is
Didn't we present that information? We had it earlier.
in January, yeah.
Yeah, and we can get that back out for everybody.
Yeah, and so we have it by exam, we have it by first-time takers versus best attempt takers, and we have that data we can share, for sure.
Just setting those cut-off scores, we went through a process of practicing teachers, for example, in the case of teaching licenses, they looked at the questions and made a determination which questions should be passed by which candidates, and basically helped us set the cutoff score based on teachers within the state of Indiana, right? We just didn't somehow meet after lunch and make up some numbers, and we play with the numbers depending on how many pass and how many fail, right?
Yes, no, that's great.
So we do it in a scientific kind of way, and now we have validity, reliability. We went through the cutoff score process, a lengthy process with many teachers involved.
Yeah, this was all developed by Indiana educators in panels, just as you described there. So, all of these exams, the questions were vetted, and these were all, vetted by Indiana educators as questions that first-year teachers ought to be able to answer.
So if we were to change it in some way, we would have to go through a scientific process in some way. We can't make a political decision.
Right.
Just to change it because we like someone or not like someone, right?
Yes, and even if we wanted to change the cut scores, that would be a process in itself, right? We'd have to reconvene some panels, we would have to make a recommendation to the board, then there's a 30-day, I think, period of time where you have to do public comment. That would be a process in itself. So I think the smart thing to do is what we're doing is letting TAC work through the questions that we have, come back with some recommendations. We've already started conversations with Pearson around some of these things that TAC has already preliminary said that we might want to take a look at, so that's encouraging. I say let's let the July meeting go and then see where we land. That'd be my advice.
Remind me again, help me out, what's going to happen in July? I think we have people out there thinking that we're doing something, and what I'm hearing is, and maybe that was just me that thought that, and we were, I get that with the study that you've done, but I think people need to know if they're in a situation where they haven't passed it now, they're not going to hear anything, they're not going to hear anything again from us for July, is what I'm hearing. And that has implications on both schools and the teachers, and I think we owe it to publicly say it right now, that way, as opposed to saying, hey, we're working on it, because I think that's what they've heard. And again, that may just be me thinking that, but I think that's what people have heard. So I just want to make sure that we're saying, we're not going to look at this again until July.
Okay.
Yes?
Why don't I circle back with them to see if we can get some sort of early preliminary report right now, as Dr. Flores indicated. The TAC supported the technical defensibility of the core program and did not indicate any significant concerns. In July, when we meet with them again, they will be reviewing recommendations for continued periodic review of the performance data and recommendations for further adherence to industry standards. But that doesn't negate where we are right now. So let me see if I can circle back with them to get a preliminary report that we can make available and post it.
And Dr. Syverson, correct me if I'm wrong, so we've talked to a lot of teachers or graduates who are in this situation, and we've not given them false promise.
Yeah, no.
So we have told them that it's under review. No, I just want to make sure that you guys don't think that we're doing that, because we're just not. So we've been trying to be good listeners and let them know where we're at with it, but just so this board knows, we have been responsive and trying to answer and listen to some of the concerns, because we know it's hard. Their jobs are on the line, their careers are on the line, their families, it's a tough situation. So we have been responsive, but we just haven't been given any promises at this point, because we don't know where it's going to go.
As the department recommended to, I only know of one individual, maybe there's more than one. As the department recommended that they take the test again and maybe do some studying in between?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, and we always point them to several resources that Pearson provides. There's a score report that they get, that they have access to after they complete it. Tells them which standards that they didn't do so well on, and there's a lot of support materials in terms of preparation for the test, so we always point them that direction as well.
We're all nice people, we want to help, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to lead people on. My time on the board, which has been 20 years, seems like 20, only been a couple. But we've never changed it. And this comes up annually when someone doesn't pass, they want us to change the pass rate scores, and we haven't done that as far as I remember.
Yep.
And so I think we need to be clear and communicate. Sometimes the answer is not the one they want to hear.
Right.
And to say that we're still studying it and so forth and so on, I really think that's misleading someone. So I hope that we're just letting people know up front that that's been our position over the years. In the likelihood that we're going to make an exception for one or two people, I guess we could do that, but I just don't see that happening.
Any other questions or comments?
Are we allowed to ask your question or not?
Not at this point, but we will be happy to grab you after. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your work on that. An ESSA update.
Madam Chair, I need to get to the airport to catch a flight.
And I know BJ, did he already leave? I know he
Yeah.
had practice. Okay,
So
absolutely, thank you.
I need to catch a flight.
Sure, thank you.
I will make this short and quick. How's that for you? Patrick McAllister is back at the department doing great work, and I'm going to provide the ESSA update for you on his behalf. So our requirements, having community, yes.
And Byron's been to more of these than I've been to several, but Patrick has done a tremendous job.
He has.
Of the community meetings and the ESSA meetings, and I just want to give just a kudos to him for, I mean, he's just done a great job of this, and if, you know, anybody's had the opportunity to go to one of the community meetings, you know, the public has had the opportunity to be heard and should feel good about them, and so, although he's not here, hopefully we will let him know that he has done a
We
good
will make
job.
sure to share that with him, and you know, he runs a great meeting, keeping good timeline within the meeting, but he is just so open, and people feel very comfortable, and he directs them where they're having meaningful conversations, but he has guardrails, so we're finding solutions and not just hearing problems. So we've all greatly appreciated Patrick. You know the requirements. We're holding community meetings. We have technical working groups coming up, and I'm going to share the timeline with you. In March and April, we had 9 community meetings in the congressional areas. Over 350 teachers, administrators, parents, and community leaders participated in our community meetings. We currently are taking the feedback and analyzing it to compile into a report, and that will be shared with the technical groups as they write the plan, so we can incorporate some of the suggestions that were made during those community meetings. Many of you, several of you, are assigned to our technical working groups. They're made up of parents, teachers, administrators, state board members, field experts, state board staff, and advocates. We will have 4 total meetings to advise ESSA plan writing. Our working groups consist of accountability, led by our Director of Accountability, Maggie Payno, supporting excellent educators, that will be led by our Chief Talent Officer, Scott Syverson, supporting all students, our Director of Title Grants and Support, Nathan Williamson, and assessment will be led by Dr. Charity Flores. The timeline, we've had the initial planning in January through March. We've held the stakeholder engagement. Now we're getting ready to jump into the technical groups with writing the plan. First draft will be ready in July, and we'll submit to the governor by August 15th, and then it will be submitted to the U.S. Department of Ed on September 18th. We're taking advantage, there are federal meetings, CCSSO, they've engaged states in several meetings, and we're making sure we participate in those. And we're very confident that we'll have a good plan to submit for the state in September. So any questions about ESSA? Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Legislative session update, last but not least. Afternoon. I realize I'm quite last, so I do have some state and federal updates that I'd like to highlight for you all.
Yeah.
Sure.
First off, read the memo. It's great.
Thank you.
You did a really good job summarizing everything. Maybe if you could just hit the, top 2 or 3 highlights, and then, any questions.
Absolutely.
In the interest of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So focusing on our priorities that came out of the Strategic Planning Committee, as Mr. Henry mentioned, pre-K did pass. It was expanded to 20 counties and $22 million. The eligibility for families to apply is capped at 127% of the poverty line, which will allow the state to braid federal funds through CCDF to expand seats. And it will be for level 3 and 4 providers. And some of that funding that goes to the 15 counties will be for capacity building, for either including more seats or pushing level 2 providers to 3 or 4. A couple of points that did come up during conference was the Senate asked for a $1 million set aside for in-home online pre-K, which was included in the bill and in the budget, and the House had a priority of including a limited voucher pathway, that if a student uses a voucher for a preschool, for a pre-K program, they're able to then continue using a voucher for kindergarten and further. Regarding character education and textbook fees, nothing really happened this session, but Brian and I will be working with you all further around our legislative priorities for next session, and that's something we can revisit how we strategize with the legislature. I don't want to touch too much on 1003. I feel like that's been discussed pretty thoroughly. A couple pieces of the budget I wanted to point out. That the foundational grants will be increasing, the foundational tuition support will be increasing by about 3.3% from 2017 to 2019. Complexity grants will actually be flat funded, so they will remain the same. As well, teacher performance grants have been renamed to teacher appreciation grants. They've been tweaked some in terms of how they will be distributed. And another key point is that there'll be $30 million appropriated for each year. The total education spending for the next 2 years is $14.2 billion. And then, so there are other key bills that passed that you can read. I'm happy to take questions. In terms of federal, there's other things moving besides healthcare on the Hill. One is CTE. The House reintroduced their CTE bill from last session that got stalled in the Senate, specifically around how the Department of Education will play into CTE. So it'll be interesting to see how the Senate resolves that with a new administration and a new secretary. I just read today that Secretary DeVos repealed the Obama-era teacher prep regs that would have connected for teacher performance and evaluation back to teacher prep schools. Under the Congressional Review Act, I don't think they're going to be revisiting those, but that is something that we will want to keep in consideration. And then finally, the continuing resolution for the omnibus, which is the consolidation of all of the appropriation bills, passed, which means the government will be funded through September. There were a couple of key provisions, key funding updates for education. I'm happy to send those electronically since I don't want to take up too much of your time. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask or email or call me. Yes?
I don't have a question. I just have a statement about legislation that has been passed previously. And just state publicly, I'm not sure where we're at on the Next Generation Hoosier Educator scholarships, but it's May 10th, and I haven't heard anything about it. And so I got to say, I'm really surprised that we haven't heard anything from the Commission for Higher Education on the status of those, because kids are making decisions about their college choices right now. And
they were awarded, because I had students who I had been a part of the process with came back and said they had or had not gotten them. So
wow, so this is a big secret, I guess. I don't know how they're rolling it out, but to me, like, this is humongous news for kids who are getting full rides to college to go into teaching. So hopefully we'll be hearing more about the scholarships that have been given. I'm just a little surprised that no one's reached out to me as somebody who's heavily involved in crafting the legislation. I haven't heard word one about any awards, so.
I can connect with CHE to see what the status is, how many they awarded. I know they did interviews, I know they awarded the scholarships, but I don't have the exact numbers, but I can connect with them about that. Follow up with you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.